They say love is the purest form of happiness. I believed that once. I believed it when Aryan first held my hand under the starlit sky, whispering promises of forever. His laughter was my favorite sound. His presence the only comfort I ever needed. But life isn't always as kind as love is. I was 26, living in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My life was simple: morning walks with Aryan, afternoons filled with laughter at the cafe, and evenings spent dreaming about our future together. Aryan wasn't just a boy I loved. He was my escape, my safe haven from the suffocating walls of my family home. My father was a man of power, respected and feared by many. To him, love was a weakness, a distraction from duty and honor. I never dared to tell him about Aryan. Deep down, I knew he would never approve. Aryan was from a humble background, working hard to build a life for himself. But in my father's eyes, wealth and status were the only measures of a man's worth. I thought I could keep my love hidden. I thought we had time. The first crack in my world appeared on an ordinary afternoon. I was sipping tea in our sunlit garden when I overheard my father talking to my mother. His voice was stern, laced with authority. The Sharma family has agreed. Their son is perfect for our daughter, educated, wealthy, and from a respected family. The wedding will happen next month. I felt the cup slip from my fingers, shattering against the stone floor. My heart raced as I tried to process his words. No, this can't be happening. I confronted him that evening, my voice trembling but determined. Papa, I don't want to marry him. I'm in love with someone else. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite understand: disappointment, anger, maybe even pity, but then his face hardened. Love, he scoffed, love doesn't feed you. Girl, it doesn't build a future. You will marry the man I've chosen. This conversation is over. But it wasn't over, not for me. The days leading up to my wedding felt like a slow death. Aryan and I tried everything: pleading, reasoning, even planning to run away. But my father's shadow loomed too large. He threatened Aryan's family, ensuring that any resistance would come at a heavy cost. On my wedding day, I felt like a puppet dressed in silk and gold, my heart shattering with every step I took towards the man I didn't love. The vows felt like chains tightening around my soul, each word sealing my fate. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run. But my feet betrayed me, walking towards a life I never chose. The house I moved into wasn't just made of bricks and walls. It was built from my broken dreams. Rajiv, my husband, was everything my father wanted for me: wealthy, influential, respected, but he was nothing I wanted. His eyes were cold, his touch mechanical. He didn't see me as a person, only as an accessory to his perfect life. The first night, he didn't say much. He just nodded at me, as if acknowledging a business transaction. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ornate mirror, reflecting a version of myself I no longer recognized. The girl in the reflection had lifeless eyes, her heart screaming in silence. Days turned into weeks, and I became a ghost in my own life. Rajiv was distant, often away on business trips. When he was home, the silence between us was suffocating. I was trapped in golden cages, surrounded by luxury but starved of love. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of Aryan's smile, his warmth, the way he'd whisper my name like it was a secret only we shared. Was he thinking of me too? Had he moved on? The not knowing was its own kind of torture. Every corner of this house whispered reminders of the life I lost. I found myself clutching onto the smallest memories: the bracelet Aryan gave me, hidden in the depths of my wardrobe; the old messages on my phone, which I read over and over until the words blurred through my tears. One day I dared to call him. My hands trembled as I dialed, my heart pounding against my ribs like a wild drum. The phone rang once, twice, and then his voicemail picked up. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? That I'm trapped, that I still love him. The walls of Rajiv's mansion felt like they were closing in. I tried to escape in small ways: reading, writing letters to Aryan that I never sent, staring out the window and imagining a world where we were together. But imagination could only take me so far. Rajiv's indifference turned into cruelty. It started subtly, sharp words, dismissive comments about how I wasn't good enough or obedient enough. But words soon turned into actions. He controlled every part of my life, what I ate, who I spoke to, even how I smiled in front of his friends. I became a puppet, my strings pulled by his whims and desires. One night, after a particularly cruel argument, I locked myself in the bathroom. I slid down the cold tiles, sobbing into my hands, my body shaking with fear and despair. How did I get here? I was once a girl who dreamed of love and freedom. And now I was a prisoner in my own life. But in that darkness, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I can't live like this, I won't. After that night in the bathroom, something inside me shifted. I realized I had two choices: continue living as a shadow of myself or fight to reclaim the life I once dreamed of. The road ahead was uncertain and terrifying, but the thought of spending another day in Rajiv's suffocating world was unbearable. I began to notice things I had previously ignored. The spare key Rajiv kept hidden under the flower vase by the main door. The way he always left his phone unattended, trusting that I was too broken to do anything with it. The small details became my weapons, tiny cracks in the fortress he had built around me. One afternoon, when Rajiv was out at a business meeting, I found the courage to call Aryan again. This time, I didn't hang up when the phone rang. Anya, his voice on the other end, was hesitant. Filled with disbelief, it had been months. But he recognized me instantly. I felt a lump form in my throat. But I forced the words out: Aryan. I'm sorry, I didn't know who else to call. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken emotions. Where are you? Are you okay? His concern wrapped around me like a warm blanket. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I told him everything about Rajiv. The control, the loneliness, and the growing fear that I would never escape this life. I'll help you, Anya, he said firmly. You're not alone. His words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness. For the first time since my wedding, I felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few weeks, Aryan and I spoke in secret. We devised a plan to get me out of Rajiv's house and start a new life together. It wasn't easy. Rajiv was meticulous, and any misstep could lead to consequences I wasn't ready to face. But I was determined. I refused to let fear dictate my life any longer. The plan was simple but risky. I would wait for Rajiv to leave on one of his frequent business trips. Aryan would be waiting nearby, and we would leave the town together, heading to a city where no one knew us. Every day felt like a countdown. My heart raced with both excitement and fear. I kept my emotions hidden, pretending to be the obedient wife Rajiv expected. While inside, I was preparing for freedom. Finally, the day arrived. Rajiv left early in the morning for a week-long trip. As soon as I was sure he was gone, I grabbed the small bag I had secretly packed, just a few clothes, some money I had managed to save, and the letters I had written to Aryan. I slipped out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt like it echoed through the empty halls. But I didn't stop, I couldn't. Aryan was waiting for me at the edge of town, his car hidden behind a cluster of trees. When I saw him, standing there with his arms open, I broke into a run the moment I reached him. He pulled me into a tight embrace, and I felt the weight of the past year melt away. You're safe now, he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. You're free. Starting over wasn't easy. We moved to a new city, far from the town that held so many painful memories. Aryan found a job as an architect, and I began working at a small bookstore. Our days were simple, but filled with the kind of peace I hadn't known in a long time. But even in this new life, the scars of my past lingered. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, haunted by nightmares of Rajiv's cold eyes and my father's cruel words. The fear never fully left me, lurking in the corners of my mind. Aryan was patient and understanding. He never pressured me to talk about my past, but he was always there when I needed him. His love was my anchor, keeping me grounded when the waves of trauma threatened to pull me under. But healing wasn't linear. There were days when I felt strong and hopeful, and others when the weight of my choices crushed me. I struggled with guilt for leaving my family, for abandoning the life I had once known, and for dragging Aryan into my chaos. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our small apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I finally voiced the fear that had been gnawing at me. "Do you ever regret it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, running away with me. Aryan turned to me, his eyes soft but filled with conviction. "Never, I would choose you 1,000 times over, Anya, you're my home." His words were a balm to my wounded heart. In that moment, I realized that while my past had shaped me, it didn't define me. I was more than the girl who had been forced into a loveless marriage. I was a survivor, and with Aryan by my side, I was ready to reclaim my life. As months turned into years, the shadows of my past began to fade, replaced by the light of new memories and experiences. Aryan and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and dreams. But the journey to freedom was not just about escaping Rajiv or my father's control. It was about finding myself again, piece by piece. I started attending therapy, confronting the traumas I had buried deep within me. It was a painful process, but it was also liberating. I learned to forgive myself for the choices I had made, to let go of the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. With Aryan's support, I pursued my passion for writing. I poured my heart into words, turning my pain into stories that resonated with others who had faced similar struggles. My first book, Chain Dreams, became a symbol of my journey from darkness to light. Years later, as I stood on a stage, accepting an award for my work, I looked out into the audience and saw Aryan's proud smile. In that moment, I knew that every struggle, every tear, and every heartbreak had led me to this point. I was no longer the girl who had been forced into a life she didn't choose. I was a woman who had fought for her freedom, who had found love in the face of adversity, and who had reclaimed her story. And as I looked into Aryan's eyes, I realized that love, true love, wasn't just about finding someone who made your heart race. It was about finding someone who stood by you when the world tried to tear you apart. Someone who helped you find the strength you didn't know you had.